Welcome back to Innovation Nation. We have John Harris with us today, and we are going to be recording our second part of our mini series, which is about artificial intelligence, what we call the artificial possibility. And so today we're going to talk about the how behind AI. In our first episode, we talked about the what and what AI is in and of itself. We simplified it, broke it down. And so, John, if you could please introduce yourself and then get us started.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and welcome back for those who are joining us for the second iteration of this, or welcome to if you're new, and I implore you to go back and watch the first one when you have the time. But I'm John Harris. I am the Director of Enterprise Solutions for a global consulting company called Guidepost Solutions. I've been in the industry for roughly 15 years, and I focus on providing comprehensive compliance and security technology solutions to enterprises of all shapes and sizes, industries, sectors, so on and so forth. And I'm super excited to be here today with Sarah to dive deeper into this topic that, if you've listened to any of our content so far, you know that we're really passionate about and excited about. So thanks for having me.
Of course. And I think a good starting point for the conversation is to explain why we're talking about this, right? This concept of AI in the physical security market has been very mysterious for many. I feel like you walk into the room and there's half the people, or maybe a quarter of people, who actually get it. And then the other rest of the group, kind of just shakes their head and assumes that they know what they're talking about. And so our goal is to just make this conversation really easy for anyone who's listening to understand what artificial intelligence is. And just to quickly give a recap, and then we'll get into the new, our topic for today. We talked about in our first episode how AI really is it's an algorithm, right? Like, there's humans out there that are creating these algorithms, which are more like, patterns in a sense, where we feed to computers, right? And the computers are looking for information, and then we're doing something with the information. John, if you remember, you used a really good example. I think it was it involved baseball, right? Or was it?
Yeah.
Do you mind just kind of recapping that example, and then we'll jump into the how?
Yeah, absolutely. So the metaphor that we talked about was a pitcher and a batter, and that every time. So the first time the pitcher sees a batter, or the batter sees a pitcher, the pitcher knows what they're going to do. They know what they're going to throw, and the batter doesn't know this individual. Does he throw fastballs, curveballs? I don't know. But I get one at bat against that individual, and I have a data set, and now I know maybe some tendencies. Right, the first pitch was outside. He pitches me inside. So the next time I go up, I have that data set. And then I can apply it against what he does at that second at bat. And now I have a larger data set, and I can start to correlate those pieces of information. That's why you see both, depending on, and I won't go too deep, but if you watch the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt, right? It's all about analytics, and it's kind of taking this way further than we'll go, but using the analytics of that, you can determine when you should hit, when you should take the ball, when you think they're going to pitch you outside, inside, fastball, curveball, et cetera. So you're taking all this data and compounding it. And as you go on, that's why you see pitchers typically only get through a lineup maybe twice. They're not going against 9 batters. So maybe typically somewhere between 5 to 6 innings. And that's why going all the way a complete game has become less and less common, because once you get that data on the pitcher, you know how to hit them better. Well, that basically, is machine learning in a nutshell. Once you have more and more data, you can make better decisions, and you can correlate those data inputs more effectively, efficiently, to solve some problem. In baseball, the problem is hitting the pitcher.
It's such a great example. I think it literally hits home for so many people because baseball is something everyone usually grows up with in America, or in this, maybe not the world, but I mean, it's the idea from like a sport perspective. When you think of any sport out there, a lot of it is data driven, right? I mean, every game has there's a method to the madness, right? And so it's interesting because when you think about it now with a how, when we're taking the how approach to it, like, how do we use AI? what are ways in our lives, whether we want to simplify it, John, and I'll let you chime in, but whether we want to explain it, in our homes, right? Like, how are we using AI here? I know we're going to get into how we do it in physical security, but I'll let you start with your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this in some of our other conversations a little bit. Day to day, I given some examples around how Microsoft in their Office suite has done a great job of infusing AI without the customer even knowing. And so if you get the Cortana once a week updates that says, like, I get mine in the morning on Mondays, and it says, hey, last week you had a bunch of emails that said, I will, or can you, or will you, or following up on, did you address these? And you can go through and say, yes, 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 no, add that to my task list. So what is it doing? They have a algorithm that's going and reading your emails, pulling out certain language that it identifies as action oriented or directive towards you. And it's coming back and reminding you, did you do this thing that this person wanted you to do? So in essence, it's creating an automated assistant for you. And then you can add it to your task list and you can say, remind me at 9 a.m. It does the same thing with helping me schedule deep learning or deep work time and focus time. It's every Monday, or I think I have it set for Sunday night, it gives me a briefing of my calendar from the week before, where it says you've collaborated with 168 people. You have a tendency to send calendar invites within 5 hours of the meeting. Can you be more planful? And it just gives you these prompts to say, oh man, I didn't think of that. Like, am I being respectful of other people's calendars when I'm waiting too long to schedule meetings? And then it says, hey, you have these 1 hour blocks available on your calendar. I'm going to proactively block them out for you. Do you approve? Yes. And so now something that was typically reserved for senior executives, that person managing your calendar, managing your time, prompting you, following up with you, is now available to anyone that has Outlook. And all of a sudden, your productivity can be enhanced and unleashed with an algorithm that is, and it's also learning. Every time I click yes or no, it's learning that this is how John likes his calendar to be managed. And so, that's something that is a, everyday example that, and Apple Siri does the same thing. My Google Nest at home, when I'm telling it what songs I like or don't like, Spotify, Alexa, all of them. I mean, it's all the same thing. And so, well, and I'll give you another example. So I read this article from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, which most people know for like the NIST frameworks and like cybersecurity, but they do a lot of amazing stuff with technology. And they just released this algorithm that helps. It's called Cameo. It's an acronym for something, but it identifies undiscovered materials through algorithmic testing. So like compounds, like chemical compounds. And so through this algorithm, it's able to 10x the amount of testing that is required in order to identify the best fit algorithms. This one specifically that it found, this material, would be applied for like DVD storage, like that type of material compound that can then be used to speed up the amount of time things are stored or saved on there, things of that nature. And so something that typically would have taken 10 years, they were able to do in a year through testing, through machine learning and AI. And I think we're seeing, at least I've heard anecdotally that a lot of those same approaches are being applied to COVID vaccine testing, where they're able to hone in on the most likely candidates for successful vaccination by doing machine learning testing and being able to test stuff in algorithmic environments before they test them in human or live lab testing.
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch there we need to unpack because there's so like we're talking about I love all these examples because I think it allows the listeners and the people who are tuning in to really understand AI around them instead of just, okay, let's talk about physical security. Because not everyone that listens to this either is a physical security expert, but we are going to get there in a couple minutes. I think the few things I want to unpack, though, you talked about productivity and being able to unleash productivity through these algorithmic patterns and things that we're looking for. Like when Cortana knows to look for patterns within your behavior, it then makes you more self-aware of what you're doing. I think that's a key thing, John, because a lot of people think that I feel like AI replaces humans or AI is going to remove jobs or make us use our brains less. And I think what's actually quite interesting is it's the opposite. You now know that you're scheduling meetings with 5-hour notice. And that's something for John to think about now moving forward. And how am I going to plan my days more effectively and make other people feel like they have enough notice before joining my meeting, right?
I give you two things that I'll pull out of that. One, it's taking low value tasks that drain my time away from higher level thinking and activities, or things that I would just never do unless I had access to a personal assistant. Okay, so now you're taking a kind of middle management individual who would not have access to that type of person, or anybody, right? Anybody with an Outlook account has access to this. So you kind of take that hierarchical caste system of who can access these tools and you throw it out the window. Anybody with an iPhone, anybody with an Alexa speaker, anybody who's using Outlook has these. So it's not about replacement. It's about enhancement or giving me access to something I would never have. So opening up a world of tools that otherwise without AI, only the elite or the most senior or most affluent would have access to.
Well, this is a great segue point because I feel like that's part of at least my passion behind it. I mean, when I think about AI and what it does, obviously you can go down the matrix path and think about all these really crazy scientific or sci-fi ideas of what AI is going to do. But I think, it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast that Elon Musk was on and, he's obsessed with AI and everyone thinks of him as the AI thought leader, at least from my perspective. That's what I've gathered. And he talks about, this idea of superhuman and, there are things being done out there where they're, creating these computer chips where they're putting it into people's brains to help with some of their, if someone has brain damage or there's, they lost, for people who might be paralyzed or have different diseases where they can't have the same motor skills that they had prior. He's creating a computer chip that will be embedded within the human skull and will help with the neurons and the neural networks and repair those, right? Patch those. And I'm not trying to take this to the matrix, but what I'm trying to get at is that there actually are really good positive ways that I do feel to your original point, John, that AI can be used. And I think it's important that we demystify it because at the end of the day, with leading now into this physical security topic, there's so many things that we can be getting done in our daily lives of physical security in our business that we couldn't do before.
Yeah. And so let me frame before we dive into this, my kind of vision or mission that I have in life is to deliver the greatest amount of positive impact, and leave a wake of greatness, meaning helping as many people as I possibly can, and just multiplying that shine and that spark by every person I touch, hopefully touching others and others and others. And I choose to do that through the security industry because that's a place that I have passion. And so take that a step further. I have a mission to provide best in class security and technology services to anyone and everyone. And it's through AI and machine learning and advanced technology capabilities that you're going to be able to give a Fortune 50 security program to anybody who has the commitment to appreciating the opportunity to have that, meaning that you don't have to have, like, think about the barriers of building a GSOC for a company. All right. You need the people, you need the physical place to put it. You need access to technology, you need access to people, you need the capital, and then you need to have the ongoing OpEx to run that bad boy. So that's a signal. I mean, it's a $2 million before you can even have a conversation about it. So imagine being able to, and it's not an imagine because it's a today thing. Like, so I'm helping people do this today. So the ability to say, we're going to take a couple appliances and some algorithms and plug it into your existing system and network, and we're going to find somebody else outside of your company that all they specialize in is monitoring and kind of the typical, SOC activities. And you're not going to have to do anything but plug it in. And so, that I think is something that our industry is still grappling with. But think about your data, cloud services, right? So you look at, and that's why I think these big tech companies are the one, so the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world are most primed to come in and knock our industry off kilter, is because they already have the mindset, they already have the technology, and they already have the capability. So if one of them decided, hey, we want to go do that, they could do it tomorrow. And since you're already familiar with ordering your whole world from Amazon, with putting your whole life on Facebook, with putting all your stuff up into the Azure cloud or Google Cloud, would you be okay with, Google's security as a service? And so, but all that has to be done through, you have to be comfortable and confident in the capabilities of doing that. And I think we're still in a place where we want it in our four walls, right? So it's a kind of a mind struggle to say, and even I empathize with that when I was the security director of like, I wanted control. But what my leadership used to always tell me, worked at an aerospace company, was we're an aerospace technology company. Anything that doesn't fulfill that mission, we should look to see if we can find somebody who does that as good as we do this, and have them come do that for us. Right. So
I wish everyone thought that way, by the way.
Right. That's the lens. I mean, if you did, just think about the global economic uplift. If somebody said, so if you read Good to Great by Jim Collins, where he goes through and assesses like the characteristics of I think about 12 companies that through a period over 30 years went from good to great by beating the like stock index by 15 times or something. I forget the mechanism that he used, but they have this concept called the Hedgehog Concept. And it's your passion, it's financially lucrative, and you can be great at it. Not just good at it, but you can be great at it. Where do those things come together in that Venn diagram? That's your hedgehog concept. If it doesn't support that hedgehog concept, don't do it. Okay, so cut everything else away and focus on that. So if companies are following that good to great model and they're only focusing on their hedgehog concept, I don't know a Fortune 50 company where security would fall into their hedgehog concept. So why do it? Why spend all of your focus and capital on that unless it directly supports your critical mission? And when that becomes something that I think, but again, that's scary from the fact if I'm a CSO or a security director at a Fortune 50 company and they start saying, hey, we don't want to spend $4 million a year on this anymore. But it also helps you focus on what, you can still be a security director and have a team of 10 people instead of a team of 200, and bring in the best and brightest from all the different types of services that you need to run an elite and best in class security organization. And I really feel that AI is the thing that unleashes that capability, because now you're really pushing everybody up to focus on the big picture stuff, the stuff that needs human intervention, and the alarm monitoring can go to algorithms.
Well, so there's a couple of things again that we hit there. You're infamous for it. It's great. It's an interesting thought because I think it really highlights the fact that like we're in it together, like in order to get things done, like there's not one organization that's going to be able to do it all ever. And I think it's interesting because as security integrators, like my background is a security integrator, right? So I worked at JCI for 5 years, and our goal was to find and to pick the pieces and put them together that was like the best in class of what it was, right? Like You go to video management, you go to access control, you go to alarm, like you're talking about alarm monitoring, and we put the pieces together as the integrator. Like they would, the customer would come to me and say, okay, what do you think is the best? I want an A, B, and C option. I want to the best, most expensive, and give me like a variance of what I can pick from. And it was very interesting because quite often, like as an integrator, my job was to make the best in class work together. Mm-hmm. And I think it was interesting because even up till now, like I'm telling you, John, there wasn't one platform out there over the years of working with technology and being myself. Like I was always kind of like the bulldog in the room. I would put a lot of the product people like to the test, and I was kind of known for it, just being very like challenging, right? Because I wanted my customers to be happy. I myself had run into scenarios in the past where I took a risk or I took a chance on a new product and it just didn't perform the way we wanted it to, right? And it didn't feel good. So what was interesting is though, there really wasn't a platform at the time. And I'm speaking like as far back, like as early as, not far back, as recent as May, like 2020. There wasn't a true platform out there that embodied AI like I personally thought it should. Right. And what you're talking about, the everyday, like the series of this world. And like, even now, I think it's either Amazon or Google or Nest, one of these, at home name products, created the drone within the house. And if someone breaks in, it starts flying in your house and like, look for someone like, and they did that probably overnight, they already were making drones or whatever they're doing. Right. And it was so easy. And now people are like, oh, I want that for my house. Right.
Well, and then eventually they'll say, why can't I have that for my company?
Exactly. Right. Like, why can't I put that in my buildings? Why can't I have the virtual security guard at the edge telling me what's going on instead of paying a human a full-time salary to do that? So my whole point and what I'm saying is that even today, like, I think a lot of companies, I think the year of 2020 has become the year of AI. I will say, like, every article or platform I'm looking at with security, I see a lot of articles coming out now about AI, and it's just like everyone's trying to talk about it, but I'm not actually seeing it be used properly. And I'm not going to like make this a commercial for my company I work at today, but I will say that like there is a reason why I joined Alcatraz, because they brought me something that we didn't have. Like they brought me this capability too, where I can go to my end user and say, stop paying your security guard a full-time salary to check if people keep their mask on. Like, we don't need to spend $180,000 a year for someone to stand there and tell me if a mask is on, right? Like, or to enforce within, or to know when someone's tailgating, or just all these things that we're typically used to doing with humans, like having our security team in the GSOC sit there and monitor the video. This goes back to computer vision and analytics, right? We have analytics now, like for computer vision, like you have AnyVision and you have BriefCam and all these platforms, right? That are just purely analytics going over the video feed to tell us what's happening in the environment. That's probably one of the few things I think that really has carried AI since inception, because that's truly computer vision, right?
Yeah. And let me touch on two things from what you talked about. So I think the true cooperative nature of is necessary, that you hit on, that we're all in this together, rising waters lift all boats. And I think what creates negative tension or downdraft in our industry is the scarcity mindset. It's a zero-sum game. that there's a finite group of consumers or what have you out there. And if I don't get it all, if I need you to lose so I can win.
Yeah.
And that creates a weird market dynamic, especially with the type of kind of channel management structure that we have, where there's fiefdom protection that takes place, because if I've spent a long time getting you comfortable with this technology, and if I introduce new technology to you, and I don't know about it, or if you get interested in new technology, is maybe a better place to put it, and I can't explain the value, then I'm going to downplay it. I'm going to say it's vaporware. I'm going to just push that aside and say no. The tried and true that you have is where you want to stay and where you want to go. And so that creates, I think, a lot of this where we don't have enough people having these conversations and saying, one, it's okay to not know the answer. I'm not an expert in AI. I'm not an expert in that. I'm relentlessly curious about it and I want to learn more. And I know enough to be able to have a conversation, but I'm always seeking a better understanding and looking for new problems to solve. And then once you find that new problem, what do you need to solve that problem? So I think that's like a backdrop to all of this. Is this kind of epidemic of scarcity that we've had in our industry for a long time. And then and so that puts us in a place right now where to your point, everyone's talking about it, but we're not really honing down at like what solution or what problems are we solving with it. Mm-hmm. And so the easiest one and the most prevalent is the video one. Is I want something to tell me what it sees on video, or tell me when something comes across here, or what have you. Right. So that's what I think is like the simplest and easiest. And for the most part, like almost every camera that is out in the marketplace is AI enabled, meaning it has analytics. And so that's great. That now becomes like the bar level access point is that you should have a system that's capable of doing video analytics. But what I'm talking about, I think we're talking about is much deeper than that. So it's looking at the challenges, like an organization really taking a look at what do I struggle with, mm-hmm. Or us as an industry talking to our customers and saying, what are your problems that our current systems are not solving or solving inadequately, or that it costs too much to solve, and then going and creating scalable, simple, sustainable solutions, hopefully using hardware they already have in place, mm-hmm. because you shouldn't have to rip and replace to put in software. So being able to pull out the metadata, utilize algorithms to marry up that information, mm-hmm. and just like that batter, get better and better at each at bat. And so what are the type of things are you doing? Like you said, it's if it's video, you're identifying people coming in without masks on. If it's your visitor information, it's identifying how many, where's my peak times, where do I have a lot of people? Where do I not? Can I balance my workload modeling where I have to have people? Do I even have to have a person there? Can I do everything? Mm-hmm. Automating processes at a lobby and pulling all of this together, the hardware solutions, the robotics, like you talked about, the drones, like those are, that's one thing that's interesting about our industry is that drones have really taken off. Or as far as maybe robotics go, and I don't mean like drones like always flying, but like automating a reception area, or putting actually robots doing tours in factories and places like that. There's a couple organizations who do that really well that are continuing to expand and grow in the marketplace. So it's pulling all of that together, and then again elevating, I think, the security industry, the jobs in the security industry to another level. So when you don't, because we always talk about kind of like the $9 an hour officer. Well, I started my career as a $9 an hour officer. So I really appreciate what that is. And my whole job that I had when I first started could be completely automated, meaning that I could then be used, paid a higher wage, and go do something more significant than spending 4 hours walking around a campus and locking all the doors, and then 4 hours walking around a campus and unlocking all the doors, because that was my job. And now that could all be done with a program. And that's it. Not even a push of a button. You program it once, and then the doors lock at 10 p.m. and unlock at 9 in the morning. So
I think though, John, I want to so if we can, I guess maybe we can talk about as part of this part of it, because we will talk about the why, right? Like eventually in the third part, we'll talk more about like, why are we doing it? Like what exactly could those problems be that we're solving? I want to give an example, and I'm going to pull this example from a different part of the industry. It's for building automation, because obviously I can talk about my company all day, every day, but I really want to make this agnostic for people to understand. And there's two technologies I want to compare. One comes from security, one comes from this building automation market, but it's one of which I think everyone's going to get. So when we talk about energy consumption, it's a very hot topic, right? Especially in 2020. It's something that we are always striving for as humans to use less of, right? Do more with less, right? Is that idea, the minimalistic mindset, and doing what we can to optimize our buildings and not keep sucking out all this energy. And so there's this company that I discovered actually about a year or two ago. They're called BrainBox AI. And what they do is they have this piece of hardware, basically, that it's really a software overlay, but they can provide a piece of hardware if you need it, if you don't have all the sensors that are supposed to be dispersed within the facility. Basically, to break it down for those listening who don't know what I'm talking about, we have sensors in our buildings, like a thermostat that's taking a temperature, it's taking a reading, it's basically a data collector, and it's bringing back this information to a computer that then does some cool computing to decide when the temperature or when the air needs to go on or the heat needs to go on, right? Like in the simplest terms. And when we turn our air conditioning on in the summer, I think we all know our electric bill goes through the roof, right? And so how are we going to find that sweet spot between that? So this company, BrainBox AI, had this device that you can bolt on to your existing environment or have sit like next to an existing server. And it basically uses deep learning and machine learning to consistently learn off that specific environment to then create patterns, AKA, trends, or not trends, sorry. We would schedule basically the heating and the air conditioning to go on and off at certain times so we can optimize the actual environment, but then not spend as much energy. And it would consistently learn to that specific environment. So it was this really cool idea of AI, right? Like you just slap it on, you're using everything you already have. And now we're solving like a couple different problems. We're eliminating the need for the human to have to go and do all that manual scheduling. We're allowing it to learn as we go, meaning like every day the building's going to be occupied differently, right? So we get to adjust within that environment. And it's very simple. The computing and all the brain power that's getting done is condensed within this either one device or within the software, depending on the environment you had. And the owner now doesn't have to think about it. They don't have to pay their, facility team to go and manage their HVAC anymore. They can now have them do other repairs in the building, make other things, optimize other areas of our spaces that don't have to be that, right? Do you follow where my head's going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and also to that extent, so all that data that you're pulling in, now you get to look at what other value can you pull out of that. So for instance, if you notice that under certain circumstances, days of the year, humidity levels, whatever, certain things happen. Maybe a certain boiler fails or another piece of equipment comes out of alignment. Well, now you have the predicating factors that identify some other issue that you can now preventively go address, depending on knowing what those factors are. The aerospace company I worked for used this for Black Hawk helicopters. They had a preventative health and usage management system, which would identify preventative failure modes and push the information to a ground station when the Black Hawk helicopter would come down. So telling them, hey, this rotary item has had 4,132 rotations, and usually it starts to fail at around 5,000. So let's address it. And instead of waiting until it's broken and then having it have downtime, which is going to cost the military money and missions, now they can proactively schedule the maintenance in between runs and don't have to worry about that anymore. So you look at that in aerospace, you have it in buildings to how more effectively run your building. And now think about what you could do with that in security.
Right. So, well, that leads me then to this other example I was going to use, because when you think about what I just explained to you and how I was able to go on and on basically about all these things now that we can do within our spaces and how we're optimizing it through AI, typically, in the past, just for comparison, so people understand, you would have an actual person, like I said, like the facilities manager sitting there going through the trends and the data and the logs and understanding what's going on in the spaces. Like building automation always had the ability for us. We always had the ability to pull a report and pull data. The data is there. It's about what we did with it. So when you slapped on this AI machine, right, this brain box AI that I'm going to just refer to, right, this tool to go then and make meaningful decisions with that data and not have to have the human doing it, that's where we see that value. We've just given back hours of somebody's day to them. Now, right. The other example I'm going to use, I don't want it to sound like I'm ever putting technology down, because I'm not. That's not my goal here. I think my goal is to challenge technology, right? It's Innovation Nation for a reason. We want to be at the cutting edge. LPR. When we first heard about LPR, what is LPR? License plate recognition, or even facial recognition, if we really want to take it to, to another extent, facial rec. When we first heard about it, and I remember like 6 years ago, it was like the cool new thing, LPR. Oh, we're going to put LPR at the guard. When the CEO drives in, we'll know the CEO's there or whatever. But that wasn't actually happening. We were just recognizing license plates and then like creating this report telling you like what license plates were driving into the facility. But like, what are we doing with it? What was so great about LPR at that time for it to have humans dedicated to developing it? Maybe you can share your thoughts, John. I have more thoughts, but I want to let you kind of chime in here.
Well, I remember when I worked for a access control manufacturer, I was talking to some consultants in Canada who had been sold the concept of license plate recognition for access control. And they could never get it to work. And the reason why is because it wasn't purpose built for that. A lot of the technology was reapplied by companies that created license plate recognition for toll booths. And so you have them, they're very expensive because they're really good at capturing license plates while the cars are going 50 miles per hour or faster. And so you have this amazing kind of technology, which under a different application makes a lot of sense, but then applied to what's really a simple problem, which is just trying to take typically 6 or so characters and positively identify them and then create some sort of action out of it. Maybe opening a gate, maybe notifying something else to happen. But in my experience, it was a cool concept that wasn't solving any real problem. So somebody said, it'd be neat if we could do license plate verification, right? And then, but there was no problem to solve. And so, when we talk about the why. We'll get to that later. But a big piece of that is you have to have a problem to solve for your AI. You can't just anecdotally throw AI out and say, hey, we want AI. Well, what problem are you solving? Well, I don't know, right? So if you took license plate recognition and say, I am going to apply it and integrate it into my access control system. So when it like I'm going to create it as a credential. So inside your access control profile, I'm going to have your badge, I'm going to have your face, I'm going to have your phone, and I'm going to have your license plate. And so when you come up, it's going to see your license plate. And the cool thing about machine learning is that it can look at the shapes, and it doesn't need to read all of them. It can say, I'm looking at the top part of this plate. That looks like the top of a 7. I think an M is over here. And it can create an algorithm that has percentages of even with a partial plate, right? 95%, and I'll let it through. And you can set those thresholds for your system to say it's got to be a 95 match or better. And so I think that's a great identification of a technology that's really cool, that has great opportunity and potential, but was applied to a problemless environment in the beginning. And so people bought it and never used it, or used it incompletely. So I'll give you an example of that. There's a community college right by my house down the street here. They have, 9 entrances into their campus, and they have LPR on 1 entrance. So not quite sure what problem they're solving. If it was to capture licenses, they're 1/9 of the way there, because if anybody comes in on any of the other 8 entrances, you're not going to capture them. And so I remember looking to apply it for like our BOLO list, to be on the lookout for either high risk previous employees or individuals or what have you. There's a couple of problems with that. Are they driving the car that you have or not? Right? So you got to think through those issues and problems. Someone else's car. Do you know what their spouse's car is? Do they cover up their license plate? Right. So, but yeah, that's where thinking through, and that's not just for. That's I think for us as the solution developers and creators is to really understand the problem that we're solving, and not just throwing out like, hey, here's a shiny new object that we think everyone's going to love, which I think a lot of companies, and this isn't a security industry discussion, this is a broader company. If you're like, you hear in kind of the marketplace, if you're not using AI today, you're behind. So people feel obligated to go get me AI. Well, what to do? What? I don't care. Just I need to say I'm using it so that I feel relevant. And going back to that good to great conversation with the book by Jim Collins, great companies use technology as an enabler, not as the creator of greatness. So it should be helping you achieve your mission, not creating your mission. And I think that's a place where we fall down across the board. End users, manufacturers, consultants, and integrators, is that we just grasp onto something and say, hey, this is a shiny new object, let's go run with it. And is it really supporting, our core value proposition?
Well, I think too, John, just like from an evolution perspective, like to kind of, bring home this example also that we're talking about, like with the LPR, why I brought this up. Like you mentioned a bunch of things that's getting me going, but I think what I want to like kind of hammer home though and make relevant in this conversation is just that, like 6 years ago when we first heard about LPR, like when I first personally heard about it, and to your point, you're like, oh, like people are putting LPR on like 1 gate when there's 9. And it's like, well, what's the point? What are you doing? Like, so great. You just spent money to try and be preventative, but what are we actually preventing here? What was interesting is that today, in this current time of 2020, I go to a workout class that's outdoors, and we're trying to respect COVID and germ transfer and all these things, right? And one of the interesting nuances that I've noticed in my life in 2020 is the idea of parking tickets. Like when you go to a public venue and you have to press the button to get the ticket, and other people are pressing that button. There's no one there standing there with hand sanitizer cleaning or spray cleaning the machine. And what's so interesting is that 6 years ago, I'm like, okay, LPR, like cool, like 1 out of 9 gates, right? Like that was my thought, right? And today in 2020, it's so interesting with this evolution of the society and the world, and kind of the brain box example I was giving you, how the AI is like adjusting like within the environment to like meet what we need within that environment, right? Like, well, this is an example of LPR technology finally adjusting to something I think that we could use it for, right? So you drive up, it knows the car's there. The ticket comes out. I don't have to touch anything. I pull my ticket, I drive in, and then I'm leaving. It already knows I paid for my parking, and the gate opens and I don't have to touch a thing. And that's such a good example now of LPR being used. Great.
Oh yeah, I'll take you one better. I download the parking lot app on my phone.
There you go.
I pay on my phone. I don't have to touch a ticket. I don't have to interact with anything. I walk up, I drive up. I can do one of two things. License plate recognition, or I can just use my app to scan the RFID, or the Bluetooth reader or what have you. And it can do both, right? And think about that for like long-term parking too. Like if I'm in a gated community, or if I'm, going to, a ball game, when we can do that again. And instead of, and if I buy a season pass, I can also buy a parking, membership that's tied to my license plate that I register. And the first time I come in, it registers me and confirms and says, yes, you have that car. And because it has AI, maybe you can also look at not just a license plate, but it also says, yes, it's a gray, mid-size sedan. So it's not just someone's license plate taken off and put on, another vehicle. Mm-hmm. And I'm not having to intervene. And again, now, not to displace jobs, mm-hmm. That whole kind of human parking lot's a really neat example, because it's not just but it's also the person walking around ticketing me. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if it's a public parking place, you have public dollars funding an individual walking around, printing out paper tickets and putting it on your windshield. So if all of that can be automated now, and we have a big dialogue today in the criminal justice system and policing, but now I can take that resource, that human resource and financial resource, and put them elsewhere of maybe a higher level of need. Because is public parking the most critical thing that we should be spending our time and money on? Or can we pay for it once and then just update the software? Or even better, let AI update itself.
I think this is like getting me ready for our next conversation, because it's such a good point. Like, it's just so real. It's so real in the sense that we are experiencing it every single day.
Yeah. I mean, even take it to, a personal level, like you go shopping and, I've 4 kids, family of 6. We buy a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So Target is very aware of our buying habits and understands exactly what we get. And at this point in time, could probably also know the cyclical nature of when we buy goldfish and milk and meat and all that kind of stuff, and just say, hey, it's about time for you to buy all this stuff again. We're going to put it into your cart, quickly go through and say yes, no, yeah, and then buy, and then come pick it up. And when we see your license plate, it will come out, right? So you don't have, because right now, I mean, and not that it's a huge issue, but I pull up and I go in my app and I say, I'm here. But, now that friction could even be taken down a level where I come up and you're identified as you pull into slot 4. I see your license plate. I know it's you. That's what's registered in your app. I come out, I load it up. You already have your preferences. Come to my side door. I'm going to open it. The person knows.
This is like the Amazon store thing too. You know what Amazon?
Exactly. Amazon Go is like my favorite thing. I mean, granted, they can, a whole other discussion around like, they put so much investment and capital into each of those stores because the amount of cameras that they have to do it. They keep some of that a little bit cloak and dagger, but it'd be interesting to see, because conceptually, if I can go in And even there's probably a little bit more friction that they need to get rid of, because the app's still kind of clunky, and the entry and act, is a little bit funny, but still, it's amazing. Like, that you can go in, grab all your stuff. You don't have to scan it. So it's not like self-checkout, right? Mm-hmm. Which still, if you go into, at least my Target, you go into my Target, there'll be 9 open lanes where you have humans checking out, and the self-checkout is stacked up 30 deep. Because people just don't want to talk to people. I think this is pre-COVID too. This isn't a COVID thing, but people just like the do it myself. Like, I want to just DIY. Like at my own pace, do my own thing and go through. Mm-hmm. Right. But I think, getting back to, and I know we're kind of trying to wrap up here. And so close it out with the how, right? And I think that, there's a different how for each segment of our market. So maybe I'll focus on the end user. The how is it really starts with asking yourself, do I have a problem or an opportunity that will be enhanced or solved by AI or machine learning? Like, if you don't, it's okay. It might not be something where you say, I got to dive in and get this right now. I'm confident most companies will or would, but if you don't, or you can't think of it, then don't kind of chase the dragon of AI if you have nowhere to put it, or go talk to somebody and say, I'm interested in figuring out how AI can help me and solve my problems. And then that's where the service side of the consultants and manufacturers and the integrators is find those end users that have problems that need solving. And if for the manufacturers, I think it's really really innovating outside of the boundaries of our traditional hardware and software offerings. So we don't have to this kind of incremental innovation of all right, I'm just taking traditional access control and I'm adding in, something and calling it AI, right? As opposed to saying, how can I think of some of the other examples we've given today? How do we take that and apply it to our industry to cause massive innovation and unleash unbelievable capabilities and productivity, as opposed to just making these incremental tweaks, which are great, but they're not going to move the needle, I think, the way that we have seen in other industries, like the ones we've talked about, building automation, which is a close cousin of security, which I think is a good one to compare to, or the retail space, which is, light years ahead. I saw something, Leo has posted something on LinkedIn that e-commerce jumped more in the last 8 months than it did in the previous decade.
No surprise there.
Now, obviously, part of that is because if you can't go anywhere, you're ordering online. But just imagine how much easier it is to do that today, and how much AI plays a part in that whole ecosystem, from identifying suppliers to fulfillment to distribution to the end user and the purchasing. I mean, the whole thing. So I think that's the hows that we have to look at, of how do we get it, how do we embrace it, how do we get it as part of our day-to-day nomenclature, and not this. It's just kind of like the cloud, right? Everyone is like this mysterious thing that, kind of like this green behind me, that's AI. It's like this crazy green thing that no one understands floating behind John, and just really talk about it as
cloud up there, literally a cloud. People, I feel like there are people I know who have thought the cloud is really cloud. It's definitely not. Big data center somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Someone else's computer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, John, I just want to thank you. I think this conversation, I know it was a bit delayed just with holidays and everything going on, but I think it's great, because this now is a perfect segue into our next conversation. We're going to dive into the why and the actual ways in which the problems that are getting solved, that need to get solved, that haven't been solved yet, right? So I think the next conversation will be extra fun. And if you have any last comments, please share, or else we can wrap it up.
Yeah, just thank you again. And I appreciate everybody tuning in to watch. And if there's something that we talked about that is particularly interesting, for our viewers, feel free to, comment once it's posted, reach out to Sarah and myself, or if we're missing something that you feel we should be talking about, or there's an example you want us to dig into, or some questions you have, let us know. We'd love to discuss this with anyone and everyone who's interested in the topic. So, Sarah, thank you again for having me. Appreciate it, and looking forward to the next conversation.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
You too.